Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shir. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn halachos sukkah, and we will be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Pei Hey Amid Beis. We pick up today on two lines off the bottom of Pei Hey Amid Aleph, Siman Taf Reish Chaf Vav in the midst of Sif Aleph. So yesterday, in the beginning of Sif Aleph, we discussed a case where we had a sukkah that's silasa beruba mechamasa. We have a sukkah that has the proper amount of schach, so that the schach is giving it more shade than sunlight. And then we have an elon, we have a tree positioned above the sukkah, where the branches of the tree are chamasa miruba mitzilasa. They give more sunlight than they do shade. In that case, in the Day Rishona, in the first opinion brought down by the Shulchan Aruch that we had yesterday, the Mechaber told us that that sukkah would be kosher. Why is that sukkah kosher? Very simple. You have a sukkah that has a proper amount of schach. There's nothing wrong with that sukkah. Above it, you have the branches of a tree. Well, what problem do those branches pose? We can't say that the sukkah beneath is puzzle because it's a sukkah tachas sukkah, because the branches of the tree don't meet the minimal requirement of being a sukkah. The branches positioned over the tree are chamasa miruba mitzilasa. They allow in more sunlight than they do shade. So that's not a sukkah. So you don't have a problem of sukkah al gabi sukkah. So what problem do you have? The schach puzzle positioned over the schach kosher. So what? Why do I care? It doesn't give me any problem. That's according to the Day Rishona. Now we're going to see a second opinion. 2 lines off the bottom, says the Mechaber V'yei. However, there are those that say, this is brought down in the name of the Avi Ezri, there are those that say, Sha'afilu im hasukkah tzilasa meruba mechamasa, even in the case where we just described, where the sukkah itself is tzilasa meruba mechamasa, beloy ha'ilon, without the branches of the tree. The ha'ilon chamasa meruba mitzilasai, and as far as the branches of the tree are concerned, they allow in more sunlight than shade. So this is exactly the case that we discussed yesterday, where according to the Day Rishona, this sukkah is kosher. Over here, the Day Shnia says, Im anfei ha'ilon mechuvanim keneged schach kosher, if the branches of the tree are positioned directly above pieces of the schach kosher that are on top of the sukkah below, psula, then the sukkah is puzzle. Why is the sukkah puzzle? So I'll just give you a heads up what we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah. The reason the sukkah is puzzle according to this Day Shnia is that if you have schach puzzle positioned directly above, with space in between, but positioned directly above the schach kosher that's below, in that case we say, wait a second, that schach kosher that's on top of the sukkah below is pointless. It's not doing anything. Even if you would take that schach kosher away, the sukkah would still be in the shade of the schach puzzle. Therefore, the schach puzzle above invalidates the schach kosher that it is on top of. And now we have to take a look at the sukkah, and we say like this: if you have enough schach puzzle from the branches of the tree invalidating enough of the schach kosher that's down below, so that minus that schach kosher, the sukkah is now chamasai meruba mitzilasai, so now you have a puzzle of sukkah. So you hear what's going on over here? The problem of the tree branches that are positioned above the sukkah is that it invalidates a certain percentage of the schach kosher that's on top of the sukkah beneath the tree. And now, what would happen if you took away all of that schach kosher that's been invalidated by the branches of the tree? If taking away that schach kosher would now create a situation in the sukkah where the sukkah would be chamasa meruba mitzilasa, so now you have a puzzle of sukkah. Now let's see it inside. So again, So the Mechaber said, even if the sukkah itself is tzilasa meruba mechamasa without the branches of the tree, and the branches of the tree do not meet the minimum requirement of schach, they are chamasai meruba mitzilasai, and therefore you don't have a problem of sukkah gabi sukkah. Still, if the branches of the tree are positioned so that they are directly opposite pieces of the schach kosher below, then psula, then the sukkah is puzzle, and this is true, says the Mechaber, bein sheha'ilon kaidim, whether the tree came first, bein sheha'sukkah kadma, or whether the sukkah came first, and we'll explain why you might think that would make a difference. And the reason for the psul is kevan she'anfei ha'ilon mechuvanim keneged schach hakosher. The problem is because the branches of the tree are positioned directly opposite pieces of the schach kosher below. Let's take a look in the Mishnah Berurah back on Pei Hei Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah all the way on the bottom line, Ois Katan Vav, Mechuvanim keneged schach hakosher psula. If the branches of the tree are positioned directly opposite pieces of the schach kosher, then the sukkah is puzzle. Why? Svira lahu, because this second opinion holds shekol mashehu tachas ilon, that any schach that is positioned directly beneath the branches of the tree, keman delesa damya, it's as if they're not there. Why? She'enoi mishamish klum, because they're not doing anything. Kevan shah elyon meitzel olav. If you have pieces, if you have branches of the tree positioned directly above and opposite pieces of the schach kosher, that means that those pieces of schach kosher are completely ineffective. They don't do anything. They're not giving shade to the sukkah, because even if you would pull them out, the branches of the tree would be giving shade to the sukkah. So therefore they're ineffective, they're invalidated, it's as if they're not there. Ve'im kein, continues the Chavetz Chaim, ve'im kein menaschach hanishar hu rak chamasai meruba mitzilasai. Now we have to analyze the situation. If the situation is such that were we to remove all of this ineffective, invalidated schach kosher, the sukkah would now be chamasai meruba mitzilasai, then the sukkah is going to be puzzled. Ve'emaschach shel ilan ein yachal lehitztaref. Now, you might say, but I don't understand. What's the problem? Why don't we just see the branches of the tree joining with the remaining schach kosher, and the sukkah is still tzilasa meruba mechamasai? Says he can't say that. Even if it's true that if we would, we'll agree. We'll say that schach kosher that's directly opposite the tree branches is ineffective and invalidated, so we'll look at it as if it's not here. Fine, so it's not here. But the branches of the tree are here, and the branches of the tree joined with the remaining schach kosher makes a good sukkah. It makes it tzilasa meruba mechamasai. It says the Chavetz Chaim, that doesn't work. Schach pasalhu. How could we be mitzvah it? How could we join the branches of the tree together with the schach kosher beneath it? That's schach pasal, it's mechuber. And that's why, according to this Deya Shniya, we have a problem over here. Now, the Mechaber said over here, you should know that this is a problem. Bein sheha'ilon kaidim, this problem is a problem whether the tree was there first, bein sheha'sukkah kadma, or whether the sukkah was there first. What chiddush is the Mechaber telling me? The answer is very simple. You might have thought that if the sukkah was there before the tree was there, then all of the schach kosher that's on top of the sukkah, it all at one point in time did give tzel to the sukkah. Now that a tree grew up and went over the sukkah, why should we say that the branches of the tree invalidate the pieces of schach kosher that are beneath it because they're ineffective? It's true that they're ineffective right now, but at one point in time, they were very effective. Before the tree grew up, now you'll ask me what the situation over here is, what kind of tree grows that fast? Well, there are these big weeds with big branches that grow incredibly quickly, and they grow quite tall. So when I built the sukkah, all of the schach kosher was there l'tzeil. It was all giving tzeil. Now it's true that this big weed tree grew up very quickly and went on top of the sukkah, but maybe we say that since when I built the sukkah, all the schach was giving tzeil, now we still look at it as giving tzeil, and we don't invalidate it because of the branches that are above it. Kamash Balon, the Mechaber comes to teach us that no, that's not a valid svara, we do not say that. Okay. Now comes the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Haga. Mihu, however, im hishpil ha'anofim lemata ve'irvan im haschach. Let's say, in this very case, this is a little complex, right? The case that we have over here is, we have a sukkah, right? The sukkah is tzilasa meruba mechamasa. We have tree branches growing above it. The tree branches, right now I'm going to say that the tree branches are chamasa meruba mitzilasa. And the Mechaber is telling us that according to this Deya Shniya, according to this second opinion, those upper branches invalidate the schach below, and if now you take away that schach, now the sukkah is puzzled. Says the Rabbah Miu, however, im hishpil ha'anavim lamata, if you take the tree branches and you pull them down to the level of the schach, the irvan im haschach, and you mix them in together with the schach, she'enon nikarin, in such a way that the tree branches are not readily discernible, they're not recognizable amongst the kosher schach, then betelin, then the pasal schach of the tree branches are batal, v'hasukkah kshera, and the sukkah is kosher. Okay, now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Zayin. Miu im hishpil ha'anofim. The truth is that the words of the Ramah over here can really be applied to two separate cases. We could have the case that the Ramah seems, the case that the Mechaber gave, that the Ramah seems to be addressing. And that's the case that I described, where the sukkah below really is a kosher sukkah. It's tzilasa meruba mechamasa. The problem is, we have these problematic tree branches above. Says the Ramah, if you take those tree branches, you pull them down to the same level as the schach kosher, and you ma'ariv them, and you mevatel them, you have more schach kosher than you have tree branches, and you mix them in, and they're einon nikarin, they're not readily discernible, now the sukkah is kosher. Why is the sukkah kosher? Well, the truth is that in the case that I just gave you, the reason the sukkah is kosher, why shouldn't it be kosher? You no longer have the problem of the upper tree branches invalidating some of the schach kosher. The only reason that they invalidated some of the schach kosher is since they were positioned, the tree branches were positioned directly above the schach kosher, it rendered the schach kosher pointless. It rendered the schach kosher ineffective. That's why we had to look at the sukkah and we had to imagine as if that schach kosher is not there. But now in the Ramah's case, that's not a problem. Now you took the tree branches and you brought them down to the same level as the schach kosher, and you mixed it in with the schach kosher. So now you no longer have tree branches positioned above schach kosher, so that it should render the schach kosher ineffective. You took care of that problem. So now, says the Ramah, if you pulled it down and you mixed it in, so now you no longer have a problem. All right, that's one case. But now, and I'm kind of telling you what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, I'm kind of telling it to you outside, but now let's imagine another case. Let's imagine a case where the sukkah below is not tzilasa meruba mechamasa. Let's say the sukkah below is chamasa meruba mitzilasa. And really, we want to use the tree branches, we want to use the pasal of tree branches in order to make the sukkah kosher. Well, in that case, we said yesterday in the day of Rishona, we said that you could do that. We said yesterday, if you look on Pei Hey Amud Aleph, about halfway down in Sif Aleph, right by the Ois Katan Daled for the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber told us, Avol, im eina sukkah tzilasa meruba mechamasa. If the sukkah is not a kosher sukkah, it's not tzilasa meruba mechamasa, ella al yedei ilan, it only becomes kosher if you could add in the pasal of tree branches. You can. Tzarech sheyashpil ha'anafim, you have to bring down the branches, via arve min haschach, and mix them in with the schach, be'inyan shelo yu nekarim, till the point where they're no longer discernible. V'yehei schach rabba aleim u'mavatlan. And then as long as the schach kosher is roiv over the schach puzzle, over the tree branches, the sukkah would be kosher. So that's a second case that the words of the Ramah here cover. The Ramah could also be covering a case where we need the tree branches. We want to mix the tree branches in together with the schach kosher. Now, the halacha in these two cases, the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, are slightly different. So let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Zayin. Miu hishpil ha'anofim. First, the Mishnah Berurah lets us know that ubazeh, if you're going to pull down the tree branches to the level of the kosher schach, mahani, that will be effective. The Mishnah Berurah is telling me right now that this covers both cases I just gave you. Ubazeh mahani afilu im eina sukkah tzilasa meruba mechamasa b'loyoilon. This eitzah of the Ramah to pull the branches down and mix them in with the schach kosher, that eitzah works even if the sukkah is not kosher on its own, even if the sukkah itself is chamasa meruba mitzilasa, ukemay l'dei rishayna. The same way the first opinion that we learned yesterday, that I just read to you from Pei Hey Amud Aleph, the same way we learned yesterday. You could do that. You could bring the tree branches down, be ma'arav it with the schach kosher, as long as it's not nicker, and as long as the schach kosher is roiv, if now the sukkah is going to be tzilasa beruba mechamasai, that could be kosher. But now, look what the Chavetz Chaim points out. V'lachein, therefore, because the Ramah covers this case as well, v'lachein, because of this, siyam Ramah, the Ramah writes in his words, she'enon nikarin. If you look at the Ramah, what did the Ramah say? The Ramah said, im hishpil ha'anafim lamata, you have to bring the tree branches down. V'irvan im aschach, you need to mix it together with the schach kosher, she'enon nikarin, so that the tree branches, the schach puzzle, should not be nicker. The reason the Ramah said that is to address this case. When do you need that the schach puzzle has to be she'enon nikarin? When do you need that you have to mix the tree branches with the schach kosher to the degree that they should no longer be recognizable? Only to cover this case. In this case, there are two factors that you need. One is that you need to be mevatel the schach puzzle. And for that, you need to have roiv schach kosher over the tree branches, and you need to be ma'arav them. You need to mix them up, perhaps. But you also need a second factor, and that is that you need tziruf. Over here, not only do you have to be mevatel the schach puzzle, but you also need the schach puzzle. You need to mix the schach puzzle together with the schach kosher because you actually want to use it. You need the schach puzzle in order to make the sukkah kosher sukkah, to make it silasa beruba mechamasai. So over here, you need more than one factor. Over here, you need hishpil, you need irvan, and you need she'enon nikarim. However, to cover the other case, where the sukkah itself is actually kosher on its own, because you don't need the schach puzzle, because the sukkah itself with its schach kosher is already tzilasa beruba mechamasa, then says the Chavetz Chaim, de'im haya schach sukkah ba'atzma tzilasa beruba mechamasa, if the sukkah itself on its own is already tzilasa beruba mechamasa, then afilu nikarin shari, then even if the schach puzzle is still discernible, it's still nicker, the sukkah is kosher. Lafi masha kasavdu likamei, according to what the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us in the next Ois Katan and Ois Katan Ches. So again, the Ramah is covering both cases, but it's only in the case that we need siruf, only then do we need einon nikarin. In the case where we don't need siruf, where all we need is bittul, then we don't need that they shouldn't be nicker. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, however, there are those that say that according to this latter opinion brought down by the Mechaber, loy mahani afilu behishpil, this eitzah of the Ramah does not work. Ela im kain schach hasukah tzilasa beruba mechamasa b'lo ya'ilan, unless we're talking about a case where the schach itself, where the sukkah itself has enough schach to be kosher. But in the other case, where you need siruf, then this whole eitzah of the Ramah doesn't work. So there's a machlokes. Is it true that the Ramah covers both cases or not? According to some, there are those that say that the Ramah does not cover both cases. In the case where you want to be mitzarif, the schach puzzle, together with the schach kosher, then according to this day achrona, it doesn't work. According to yesterday's day rishona, it does work. But according to this day achrona, perhaps it does not work. Ulamaisa nachal lahachmir kavasayu, and the Chavetz Chaim says that halacha lamaisa, we should be makmir like that opinion. Ois katan ches. The Ramah, again, what did the Ramah say? He said you have to be mashpil the anafim lamata, you have to bring them down, you have to be ma'arav them, you have to mix them into the schach kosher, and they have to be einon nikarin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ve'im hayat tzilasa meruba mechamasa. Then, like we just learned in the previous ice cotton, if the sukkah itself is tzilasa meruba mechamasa on its own, afilu hayu nikarim, then even if the schach pasel, the branches of the tree, are still nicker, or if the branches of the tree are not me'uriv, you didn't bring down the branches of the tree and then mix them in and intersperse them amongst your bamboo branches or amongst the branches, the kashara branches that you have on top of your sukkah. All you did was somehow you brought the branches down so that they're laying directly on top of the schach kosher. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, shari, the sukkah is kosher, kevin shehem merubim mischach ilan, since it's roiv schach kosher over the branches of the tree, so the schach puzzle is bottle. V'yesh cholkin al zeh. However, some disagree. Now, I want to delve a little bit deeper into this. What did the Mishnah Berurah just tell me? So first, the Mishnah Berurah is telling me something that we already discussed in the previous ice cotton. He's telling me if the sukkah below is a kosher sukkah without the tree branches, it's tzilasa meruba mechamasa, then we do not need what the Ramah said, that the schach pasel has to be einon nikarim. It could be nikarim. It's okay if it's nicker. Now, the second thing that the Mishnah Berurah tells me here is another case. Oy hayu munachim zeh al gav zeh mamish. What does the Chavetz Chaim mean by that? He's giving us another possibility. Maybe you brought the tree branches down and you put them right on top of your schach. You didn't mix them in at all. They're not even mixed in. Forget that they're nicker. They're nicker and they're not even mixed in at all. All you did was bring it down and you have roiv schach kosher over the schach puzzle. In both of these cases, the Mishnah Berurah says the sukkah is going to be kosher. So let's take these one at a time. In the case that the schach puzzle is nicker, the reason you don't have a problem is because something I said earlier in this year. Let's remember, according to this Deya Achrona, what is the problem of the tree branches above? We're talking here in a case where the tree branches above, achamasai meruba mitzilasai, they allow in more sunlight than they create shade. If the upper tree branches would be tzilasai meruba mechamasai, if the upper tree branches would be giving more shade than they allow in sun, then in all of these cases the sukkah below is puzzle. We said that right away in the beginning of Sif Aleph yesterday, right? That we said right away in the beginning. Ima ilon tzilasai meruba mechamasai psula b'chalinyan. And then it's puzzle. There's nothing to talk about. The sukkah below is puzzle. So we're talking about a case over here where the branches of the tree above are chamasai meruba mitzilasai. They allow in more sun than they create shade. According to this Day Achrona, the problem with those upper tree branches is that they invalidate the schach that they are positioned directly over, because it renders that schach beneath it ineffective. It's pointless. It's not doing anything. That's the whole problem. Well, in that case, if you brought the tree branches down to the same level, and the schach kosher is roiv on the schach puzzle, what do I care that the schach puzzle is nicker? The schach puzzle is not creating any problem at all. It's no longer rendering any schach ineffective because it's no longer positioned above any schach kosher. It's on the same level as the schach kosher. And it's bottle, because there's a roiv of the schach kosher connected to schach puzzle. So it's not posing any problem at all. And I don't care if it's nicker. The second case of the Mishnah Berurah, where the Mishnah Berurah says, Oy hayu munachin zeh al gav zeh mamish. You brought down the tree branches, and you didn't put them mamish on the same level. The tree branches are not laying next to the schach kosher. The tree branches are literally on top of the schach kosher. Here too, the Chavetz Chaim says the sukkah is going to be kosher. Now you might ask me why? Why don't we say that those tree branches that are laying right on top of the bamboo pieces, it should render the bamboo pieces ineffective? We should look at it as if the bamboo pieces are in here, and now we should say that the sukkah is chamasa berubah b'silasa, the sukkah is puzzle. Why don't we say that? The answer, it seems, is that as long as the schach puzzle is directly on top of the schach kosher, so that there's no space in between them, then we do not look at the schach puzzle and the schach kosher as being two separate entities. We don't say that the schach kosher is rendered ineffective because there's a piece of schach kosher, a schach puzzle, that's giving shade. No, both of them are giving shade together. They're mamish touching each other. They're mamish laying one on top of the other. And you can see this in the Sharet Tzion in Ois Cotton Yud. If you take a look at Ois Cotton Yud here, the Chavetz Chaim brings down from the Pri Megadim, he says, the Imloy Hayu Zeh al Gabe Zeh Mamish. If the schach puzzle would not be directly on top of the schach kosher, so that it's mamish laying on top of it and touching it, rather there would be some space between them, then then definitely according to this day achrona, the sukkah would be puzzle even if the sukkah itself is tzilasa meruba mechamasa with its schach kosher. The kol schach shekeneged anfei ha'ilana is commandalesa damya, because then we would say that the branches of the tree invalidate the pieces of schach that are beneath them. But since there's no space between them, we no longer say that. Okay. Complicated stuff. Now let's continue in the words of the Rama. Last word on the second line. V'chein similarly miniach schach kosher al schach puzzle. If you put the kosher schach on top of the schach puzzle, mikri eruv, that's called mixing them together. The kosher, and again the schach puzzle would be bottle, and the sukkah would be kosher if it's tzilasa meruba mei chamasa. Ois cotton tes mikri eruv. V'hainu kishahaya schach kosher meruba al puzzle. Again, even in this case, you need roiv of the schach kosher over the schach puzzle. Let's say you have a situation where you have the schach puzzle is very clearly distinct from the schach kosher. They're not mixed at all. They're laying next to each other. In this case, very interesting, you wouldn't need a roiv in the kosher keneged the puzzle. Ella afilu mechza al mechza, even if it would be 50-50, gam ken sukkah kshered du halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This is based on the halacha l'Moshe Sinai that parrots, if the, let's say by a question of an erev, anytime you have a question of a mechitza, parrots, if the parrots and the amud, if the open space and the closed space are 50-50, it's considered closed. But since it's hard to be exact, you shouldn't take the risk of 50-50. You should make sure there's a little bit of schach kosher over the schach puzzle. Now let's continue with the words of the Mechaber, 3 lines down near the end. Aval. So far we were addressing a case where the branches of the tree were positioned directly above pieces of the schach kosher. Now says the Mechaber, Aval im ha'anafim keneged ha'avir shebein haschach ha'kosher. Let's say that's not the case. Let's say the branches of the tree were not positioned directly above the pieces of the schach kosher, Rather, they were positioned above the empty spaces between the pieces of schach kosher. Or says the Rama, sha'schach harbe, or let's say there's so much schach kosher, sha'afilu yinotel neged ilan nishar kishir. Or, and we covered this case already in the Mishnah Berurah, or let's say we go back to the original case, that yes, the tree branches were positioned directly above pieces of kosher schach, but there's so much kosher schach that even if you remove the pieces of kosher schach that are positioned directly beneath the tree branches, you still have a sukkah that's tzilasa berubah mechamasa. In both of those cases, kishera the sukkah is kosher, hayil v'tzela kosher hu merubah mechamasa. Because in both of these cases, what's the problem? The sukkah is tzilasa berubah mechamasa without the tree. Sha'afilu im yinotel ilan, even if you would take away the tree, yesh shir b'kosher lahakshir. You have enough kosher eschach to make a kosher sukkah below. And in all of these cases, it makes no difference what came first, the sukkah or the tree. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah over here. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in yud. Aval im ha'anofim. However, if the tree branches above are not positioned directly over kosher pieces of schach, instead they're positioned over the open spaces between the pieces of the schach, points out the Chavetz Chaim, umayri, but again we're talking about a case shemin ha'anofim lo yetzel harbe, where the trees only create chamasai meruba mitzilasai, not tzilasa meruba mechamasai. The chamasa meruba mitzilasa, says the Chavetz Chaim, so that we don't have a problem of sukkah al gabe sukkah. So says the mechaber, in such a case where the tree branches are positioned over the open spaces, and we don't have a problem of sukkah al gabi sukkah because the tree branches let in more sun than they create shade. And then the Ramah put in the case where, or if you would have enough kosher eschach below, that even if you would take out the pieces of kosher eschach that are directly beneath the tree branches, you still would have a sukkah that's tzilasa berumeh mechamasa. Then the mechaber said the sukkah is kosher. And Ois cut in Yud Aleph, the mechaber said why? Sha'afilu yinotel neged ilan, because even if you would take away the pieces of kosher eschach that are directly beneath the branches of the tree, right? You don't. So okay, you still have a kosher sukkah. The Chavetz Chaim points out a side point here. Umashbir min hapaiskim. The implication of the paiskim is the chashvina l'schach shekeneged ilan kischach pasel. He's addressing a side point over here. What he's addressing is, in this case of the Ramah, the tree branches are positioned directly above pieces of schach kosher. But it's not a problem that the tree branches invalidate the schach kosher that are beneath it, because even if you would take that schach kosher off the sukkah below would still be tzilasa beruba mechamasa, therefore the sukkah is kosher. Side point, says the Chavetz Chaim. However, how do you view that puzzle, that schach kosher that's invalidated by the tree branches? How do you look at it? Do you look at it as empty space, or do you look at it as schach puzzle? And that makes a halachic difference, says the Mishnah Berurah. What's the difference? So again, let's look at Yud Aleph. Umashbim min hapaiskim. The implication of the paiskim is the chashvino l'schach shekeneged ilan kischach puzzle. We look at that schach kosher that's directly beneath the branches of the tree as being schach puzzle. Valkain, and therefore, ein lahakshir, we cannot allow the sukkah to be kosher. Eli imkain hu pachas me'arbot tfocham b'sukkah gedola. It has to be that you have less schach puzzle than 4 tfachim if the sukkah is a big sukkah, or pachas mishloisha tfachim b'ktana, or less than 3 tfachim of this schach puzzle if we're dealing with a small sukkah. What does he mean? What he means is like this. If the sukkah is a sukkah gedola, meaning that it's bigger than the minimum size of a sukkah. The minimum size of a sukkah is zayin al zayin. If it's a bigger sukkah, well then, if you would have schach puzzle of dalit tfachim, an area of schach puzzle of dalit tfachim wide, cutting the sukkah down the middle, then the sukkah would be puzzle. Why is the sukkah puzzle? Because it breaks the sukkah into 2, and you don't have 3, in a case where you wouldn't have 3 walls for each side of a sukkah, so then that band of dalit tfachim of schach puzzle would render the sukkah puzzle. If you have a sukkah katana that just has the minimum size share of a sukkah, so then if you have a band of 3 tvachim of schach puzzle, it makes the sukkah a puzzle. Okay. I've cut Yud Beisha, I feel minata le'ilan. Ritzayna Lomar, what the Mechaber wants to say over here is, Deloi tikshi my heavy im ha'anafim keneged ha'avir. The case that the Mechaber gave is, where the tree branches are not positioned above pieces of schach kosher, they're positioned above the empty spaces between the pieces of the schach kosher, and the Mechaber said that sukkah is kosher. The tree branches do not invalidate the sukkah. Why is that? So the Mechaber said, you know why? Even if you would remove the tree, so what? You have a sukkah that's silasa meruba mechamasa, you have a kosher sukkah. Says the Chavetz Chaim Ritzayna Loimar, the reason the Mechaber is going out of his way to give this explanation is, Deloitte Tikshi, you shouldn't ask a question. My heavy im ha'anafim keneged ha'avir. So what? So the tree branches are positioned above the empty spaces instead of being positioned above the schach. Why does that allow the sukkah to be kosher? You still have schach kosher and schach puzzle giving shade over this sukkah. Why isn't that a problem? And to answer this, the Mechaber explains, the reason it's okay is because even if you would remove the tree, you still have a kosher sukkah. Hainu, the point of that is, the tree above is not giving any effect. In other words, it doesn't have the shear, it doesn't have the minimum shear of sukkah. It's not silasa beruba mechamasai. The belav tzeldi day, without its shade, yesh silasa beruba mechamasa min aschach gufa. The kosher aschach is giving us silasa beruba mechamasa. Ula afuke min amfi ilan loy heavy ki im chamasa beruba mitzilasa. And the tree branches themselves are chamasa meruba mitzilasa, the chanal b'sif katan yud, like the Chavetz Chaim told you, that's the case we must be discussing in sif katan yud. And since the tree branches themselves are only chamasa meruba mitzilasa, you see, you don't have a problem of sukkah al gabe sukkah. So what problem do you have? You can't say that they're invalidating pieces of schach beneath them because they're not positioned over pieces of schach. They're only positioned over open space. Okay, very, very complex sif. Now let's go to Sif Beis. Try to at least finish the page. Says the Mechaber, Im katzat se'ilon lahakshiroi. So you went out to your backyard and you realized that you have this problem. This actually happened to me years ago in Edison Highland Park. I was walking down the street and I turned and I looked and I saw a beautiful sukkah with a beautiful oak tree over the sukkah. There was no shiloh. All of the branches of the oak tree were totally above the sukkah. And this was already in middle of sukkahs. And I'm like, what on earth? And I went and I knocked on the door. And I pointed out to the people that the sukkah is not a kosher sukkah. And it's not as if they never knew this halacha. They did. Somehow they just totally forgot about it and didn't realize that they built their sukkah under a tree. So what happens if somebody built their sukkah under a tree? Now they want to solve the problem. So what are they going to do? They're going to cut down the tree. Says the Mechaber, if you cut down the tree as an attempt to make the sukkah kosher, and not only that, what you want to do is like this. Let's say even better. Let's say you built the sukkah, and then you went into the sukkah and you said, you know what? The schach is a little bit sparse. I'm not sure if the schach is really enough, if it's silasa beruba mechamasa. Now, I have a tree, and the branches of the tree are shading over the sukkah, but that's schach puzzle. But you know what? If that could be rendered into schach kosher, I would have a great sukkah. So I have a great idea. The problem with the branches of the tree are that it's schach puzzle because it's mechuber. So I'll take out my chainsaw and I'll cut the tree, and now it's not mechuber anymore. Now it's kosher schach, and now I have a beautiful sukkah. Says the Mechaber, kosher. The sukkah is kosher, with a caveat. V'hu she'yinana'oi, what you have to do is you have to be minaneya, you have to move all of the schach. What does that mean, says the Mechaber? She'yagbia kol echad levadoi, you have to pick up each branch of the tree, umanichoi, you have to pick it up and put it down. V'chayzer u'magbia chaveroi, and then pick up the next piece, umanichoi, and put it down. V'im lav, but if you skip this step, If you don't pick up each branch and put it down, and we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah that you have to do that l'shem tzeil, you have to do that with the intent that you're putting it down to give shade to the sukkah, psula, then the sukkah is puzzle. Why is the sukkah puzzle? Mishum, because of the famous rule, taseh v'loy mina asui. You have to make a sukkah, but you can't create a sukkah out of something that was already made. What does that mean? Over here, you have a sukkah, and the schach puzzle is giving shade to the sukkah. But that schach is puzzle. But you already have a situation where the sukkah is here, and the sukkah is in the shade of the schach puzzle. Now, by detaching the tree from the ground and making it no longer mechuber, what you're doing is you're removing the psul, but you're not building a kosher sukkah. The sukkah was already built. You're just removing a psul. That's a problem of taseh v'lo mina asui. So how do you get rid of that problem? The way you get rid of the problem is you go to each branch, you pick it up, so you're removing it, and now you put it back down l'shem tzeil. So now you're building a sukkah. Now it's taseh v'lo mina asui. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Oiskat Yud Gimel. Im kotzatz. Ritzono loymar. What the Mechaber wants to tell you over here is, even if you built the sukkah and you draped the branches of this tree above the sukkah so that it should give tzeil to the sukkah and it should be schach. They have a schach puzzle, and it's puzzle schach, the mechuber, because it's mechuber. There's a way to make this sukkah kosher, and there should be no problem of taseh v'lo mina asui. Have a asiyah mechadash. The fact that you cut the tree l'shem schach, that together with lifting each piece and putting it down will make the sukkah a kosher sukkah. The kosher afilu ein sham shum schach acher, and the sukkah will be kosher even without any other schach. Mikamakam, however, b'ktzitza levad, just by cutting the tree with the chainsaw and making it no longer mechuber, loy mikri asiyah gemura. That's not a real asiyah. Because yes, it's true that you're cutting it now, but the branches are already draped over the sukkah. After you cut it, you still have to move each branch. So now you're putting each branch there l'shem tzeil now. You have to put each piece down l'shem tzeil, in the name with kavana that it should give shade, not l'shem mitzvah. You don't have to do it l'shem mitzvah sukkah. You have to do it l'shem tzeil. We're going to see later, we paskin like Beis Hillel, that you don't have to build the sukkah l'shem mitzvah. You don't need l'shma, but you do need l'shem tzeil. It has to be schach. Ve'itzarech la'anicha l'shem sukkah. Now an interesting case, says the Mishnah Berurah. Let's say you built your sukkah, and you need schach. And your neighbor just cut down a sapling that has a lot of branches. So you say, you know what, I have a very cute idea. You take the sapling, you bring it next to your sukkah, you stick it into the ground, and you drape the branches of the sapling over the sukkah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Im tachav yichor shel ilon ba'aretz. If you take a branch of a tree or a sapling of a tree, and you stick it into the ground, imanofim, with his branches attached to it, va'olim harbe l'shem tzeil ala sukkah, and you drape all the branches and the leaves and everything over the sukkah l'shem tzeil, kosher, it's kosher. Why not? That's not mechuber. If it doesn't take root into the ground, that's not called mechuber just because you stuck it into the ground. V'im shaloi l'shem tzeil, but if you didn't do it l'shem tzeil, uk'she'egia zman sukkah kiven she'yeh l'shem tzeil, possible mishum taseh v'lo mina asui, v'im hishrish, but if it takes root, afilu tchave l'shem tzeil, possible mishum mechuber, but if it does take root, then it's possible because it is mechuber. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan on God's Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua for us to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the BS Gal Tzedek v'Meher v'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.